And we're live. What's up, everybody? I've got
Ooh.
Enuff Z'Nuff and Alex Kane from Enuff Z'Nuff with me today. How y'all doing?
Great, man.
Pretty good. It's another day above ground here on a Monday. And I'm in Chicago right now. Alex is in Arizona.
Yep.
Nice. What's the scene like in Chicago right now as far as everything? Are restaurants open? You able to go out and
There
eat?
isn't a scene, unfortunately. Everything is kind of we're all being sequestered, told to stay in our houses. If you have to go out for essential stuff, i.e., a doctor's appointment or food, you can do that. But otherwise, they're pretty much telling everybody to stay in right now. And I get it. They want to curtail this pandemic in the best way they can. I'm an optimistic guy. I'm not pessimist at all, but maybe it's better off to just for the next month or so for everybody to just try to take it easy and not go out so much and just wear your mask when you do. Even if you don't believe in it, just to do it because you make the other cat feel healthier and safer. And let's just get through this because there's tons of shows that are happening next year. All the big boys are going to be going out there, you know, McCartney and Elton John and Metallica, Lady Gaga, and the list goes on and on. And we got a big tour happening, as a matter of fact, too. So we want to see things happen, and we want to do it the right way. We want everybody's safety. I'm concerned right now, if anything, for our, you know, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, military, you know, all the people around the country to help keep us safe, the cops. I think that's real important that we give a shout out and love to those brothers and sisters out there that put their self on the line every single day for us. And I think if we work together as a team, and it can be done, it's a very resilient country. We'll get through this. We've faced a lot of things before in the past, and we've made it through it. So I'm hoping that the same thing happens this time, where we respect each other and try to make this happen as smoothly as possible. So next year and going into 2021, we can start looking at shows again and get back to reality.
Yeah, and luckily we've had some good news in the last week as far as potential vaccines and everything. So I think that's going to definitely help speed up the process. Regardless if everybody goes and gets the vaccine or not, it's still a step in the right direction. And like you said, it's nice just to be respectful to everybody. If you don't like wearing your mask, none of us like wearing it, but if you have to put it on for 2 minutes to go in the gas station, it's not the worst thing in the world.
Not at all. And first of all, God, Chip, please run for office, because you just totally got my vote until the day I die now. I swear to God, that was like the most inspiring shit I've heard.
We all heard it here first. Chip Z'Nuff for president. We'll start the campaign now.
Absolutely. You make a great president because you do accurately represent both sides. You know what I mean? You're not one guy who's going to be like me. I'm over here all the time. You know what I mean? But Chip sees both sides. So like I'd vote for him because I know not only does he understand my views, but also some of my friends that don't share my political views, but we still all love Back in Black by AC/DC, you know what I mean? And the new AC/DC album proves that 2020 hasn't been a total wash.
Dude, that's for sure. Those guys will be able to pump out quality music for the rest of time, man.
I'm hearing that the AC/DC was going to do a double record. I heard they recorded a bunch of material, and then they just took the best 12 of this record right here, or ones they thought they would fit well. And I'm speculating right now. I don't know. I've been play with AC/DC before we opened for them at Donington Download. Nice. I don't know the guys where they've told me anything that that everybody else doesn't know, except the fact that they wanted to put a great record out. And instead of waiting until next year, they put it out for all of us this year. And it was this great move, really a shot in the arm for everybody to go, wow, rock and roll is still flourishing. The biggest band in the world is still out there, and their record is solid as a rock. Powered Up, it's called. I think it's a strong record, and
it's a great record.
Not to throw myself in the same category as AC/DC. They're a powerful band beyond belief. But Enuff Z'Nuff, we got our record out in June or July of this year. Probably one of the first
that was
pandemic records.
A ballsy move, you know.
We weren't sure what to do. We talked to Frontiers about that, and they said, you know, we think it's in a good time to put it out there. And I'm not so sure I agree with that, but I'm grateful that we did now, looking back in hindsight, because a lot of cats are holding records out until next year. It's going to be the wild, wild west. We're going to have so many albums released next year, and it's going to be the old case of too much product, not enough demand, perhaps. So any band that puts a record out this year, we have the first post-pandemic record of 2020 in July for our Brainwashed Generation record, and I'm quite proud of it. It did very well for us, and I just want to get out there and play and record these songs live and do some live stuff starting next year.
Yeah, and it's a great record. I'm a huge fan of it. I've been bumping it since it came out, and like I said, a really ballsy move to put a record out when at that time that really was probably the most uncertain time of the pandemic leading into June, because and April was kind of a washy month where we were like, we don't really know how long this is going to go on. It could be the next week or it could be for the next year. And then June, it's just looking like the whole year is a wash, and you guys are like, we're putting this album out. And I think that was, kind of like what you said about AC/DC. It was a good shot in the arm when everybody needed it.
Yeah. Yeah, because especially like with recorded music, I mean, what's happening to all of us that tour significantly, is one thing. And, all of us that go see tours significantly, well, that's another thing. What happened to Chip? Did he just explode? Oh, there he is.
He had to get the fog machine rolling.
But recorded music, I mean, you have to go back in time to really differentiate between the live show and the recorded music, where one wasn't always part and parcel. You know what I mean? Like when I was little, I had all the Zeppelin records, but I only saw them like once. You know what I mean? And, I had all the Kiss records and I could listen to them every single day. And I think in a certain degree, at least right now, we're back to that where the music itself needs to do the talking. And then eventually the human being, I mean, fucking leading up against Chip on stage and getting all sweaty and, you know what I mean? There's no better feeling than a good night with Enuff Z'Nuff. And I promise you that's the case. So we all miss that terribly, as do the people that come see us. But the recorded music is still there. So you can go out there and you can buy the Z'Nuff album, Brainwashed Generation. You can buy the new DC album. You can still support music and be a part of the musical experience.
Yeah, and we got to get Frontiers to put it on vinyl. I've got to get that for my vinyl collection. So
That'd be nice.
Whenever they announce that, I'll be the first one to pre-order it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I talked to Frontiers about that. I think we're going to put a vinyl record out, but for right now, we were just waiting until things open up a little bit for us, and then we were going to actually go out on the road, bring some copies with us, and sign them all. And I think the fans actually, as they hail that, I know I do when I go buy a record, and I got the autographs of all the guys that are contributing. That's pretty exciting to me. It's even better than just getting the record itself. In the meantime, though, you can download it. You can get it everywhere, Apple and Spotify and all the different the different websites around the country, also through social media. So we're on everything right now. You can't get the vinyl at this minute, but
you can get
it anywhere else you want to, and that's pretty exciting as itself. And next year, I promise you, there are a lot of big surprises for Enuff Z'Nuff in the coming year.
Nice. And I know as a big Enuff Z'Nuff fan, I'm looking forward to all that myself. So let's kind of go ahead and jump into some of these questions that I got ready for you guys. So I want to kind of start at, the early days in Enuff Z'Nuff, because as some people that are new fans of the band might not know, is that Alex was involved in the group way back in the day during the early years. So kind of talk me through how you two met each other.
They were, well, that was in prison, but they were actually. What was because there was Bottoms Up and the Malls and Enuff Z'Nuff, right?
Yeah, and I would go see you play. You would do gigs around Chicagoland area.
Didn't I?
And we hung out together, and your band was fabulous at the time. It was Bottoms Up at first.
Wait a minute, did we maybe meet at, what was it, Haymakers? What was the one on the south side?
It was called Haywires.
Haywires.
Yeah.
And maybe Bottoms Up is the band that pretty much eventually became Life, Sex, and Death. Whose shirts?
That's correct. You guys would come out and do two sets. The first set was Be Real Poppy. The second set would be Heavier Than Sin. And your singer would, of course, dress up in bells and whistles, suit, coat, tie.
Bottoms Up was a wedding band.
Yeah.
That's right.
Nice.
We were a wedding band, so we would all wear like, tuxedos, or, we'd rock it up and whatever and make it look, but I mean, again, I don't think anybody from Chicago, I think the things that we do when you're a Chicago, raised musician, you think you're like, oh, this is totally what the mainstream wants. And then you show up with a guy that everybody thinks is a homeless dude. You know what I mean? And, and the same thing with Enuff Z'Nuff. It's like a total slam dunk in our minds. But, and obviously Enuff Z'Nuff had more success without me than with me. But, I hear those tunes and I'm like, well, and they actually did end up being classics. So I'm sort of nullifying my own point. But like in Chicago, we do what we do, and we're kind of like on these floating islands, and then, people can jump on and hang out with us, and you know what I mean? But we're not really trying to get too many everybody's to fall in love with us just because whatever. That's not how. Well, you're Kentucky South or Midwest? Which is it?
It's considered the South, but it's pretty north when you look at the map.
Like you're kind of up there, like Oklahoma style, right?
I'm
Not far from Cincinnati.
Yeah, I'm only about an hour south of Cincinnati, so.
So we're basically farmers with funny haircuts.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we came there last year. We played out there with, if I'm not mistaken, it was Great White and Bullet Boys. We did a show out there at one of your big places. It was really well attended. And I hung out with a lot of friends out there. I love Kentucky. I think it's a great place. And I was surprised to see everybody. There was just tons of people drinking and smoking and burning the candle at both ends. And they live for rock and roll out there. So it'd be nice to go back there again and do some more shows and get a chance to promote this Brainwashed Generation record. I remember in the early days playing out there, and I'd be following around Def Leppard, or we open up for Poison and Quiet Riot and Warrant. And those shows, the people would just go crazy. They were just starving for rock and roll and heavy metal out there. And it's a great place to play. People are real nice. I would consider it a red state. Sort of go to the wind to the right a little bit, but I don't care what bus you want to drive. I just want to get to the picnic.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
And that's how we met.
Nice. Yeah, so talk to me about bringing Alex into the band back originally in 1987, if I'm not mistaken, because I know Enuff Z'Nuff had been around for 2-3 years, and there was another one or two guitarists before him, but talk to me about bringing Alex into the group.
Wasn't it 86 and 87?
Yeah, it was 86, 87. In the early Enuff Z'Nuff days, we had a guy named Gino Martino that was playing guitar with us. And then for about 6 months, we had Pete Comita from Cheap Trick in the band.
Okay.
Nice. And Pete it was wonderful hanging out with Pete. He had a band called The Thumbs. They were terrific, playing in Chicago clubs. The drummer from Whitesnake was playing with them, Tommy Aldridge. They were, and of course the singer was the singer from Off Broadway. And they really had a vibe about him. A guy named Cliff Johnson, by the way, the singer from Off Broadway. And they were playing clubs. And then when that band went to the wayside, he joined our group. We had a little rehearsal spot in Calumet Park, Illinois. We went through about 6 months of playing basement parties and anywhere we can get a gig. And then Pete just couldn't make the fourth quarter. It was a jump for him, leaving Cheap Trick and going to Enuff Z'Nuff. And it wasn't in his best interest that he went from graduating college to back to high school when he joined us. And, they had all the numbers, and they were touring around the country, and they had some credibility, and we were just starting out. When he left the band, I got together with Alex in a place called Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, with Tommy Holland and Greg Potter, and we already have a project. We didn't know what we were going to call it, but we were staying at this guy named Pod Hill's house.
Oh,
my God. He was one of the top 100 people in Forbes magazine, richest guys. Guess he was in the oil or something. And his kids were fans of our band. So they let us stay over there and rehearse a little bit. And it was really good. That was a great band. But we both had stuff that we were both working on at the same time. So while we were doing that, I had Enuff Z'Nuff still. Alex was doing his Bottoms Up thing, and Tommy was still trying to keep his band Holland together. And when we did about 2 weeks together of writing songs, and I'm telling you guys, I wish that stuff would see the light of day, because there was some great stuff on it. I remember one song, High Flying Girls, it sounded like Van Halen meets Queen and they fight in an alley and turns into the Beatles on acid. was just a
Nice.
really a band that had a lot of personnel, a lot of character. We just
That-
couldn't make the fourth quarter at that time because nobody wanted to just dedicate themselves to that one project. We were trying a bunch of different stuff together, and I admire us all. I admire our Struck for being able to do that. But then I seen there was an opening in Enuff Z'Nuff, and that's when I asked Alex. And Donnie and I absolutely loved the way he played, and loved his look and personality. So we brought him down. And Alex wasn't just a guitar player. He was a singer. He was a songwriter. He was a record producer. He also churned butter in Amsterdam in his days off. And he also rode bicycles. He was like
And
a
I'm cleaning
six-trick
my
pony,
oven.
you know. And so he came into the fold and started playing the songs. And we came up with a wonderful batch of material. We were recording in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, at a place called Raw Recorders. And unfortunately, at the time, our management company was doing more cocaine than the band. We were out of control. We were
And that's saying
unmanageable.
something.
Yeah, we couldn't stay up. We just couldn't make the fourth quarter for one reason or another. Alex noticed that right away, and he jumped ship to put together his other project. And we continue to carry on and trying to make things happen. And it was a good move on both guys' part, because if Alex didn't leave, we would never have Life, Sex, and Death, which we're huge fans of. I remember going to see Life, Sex, and Death in the clubs, and the guys from Anthrax and Faster Pussycat and LA Guns, all the groups would come out and see those cats because they were absolutely incendiary. Those shows were on 20. The band was on fire. The songs were strong, and the singer was a star. And of course, while we watched them guys get a record deal, we sat by the wayside, jealous beyond belief,
You guys
just
had a
trying to
deal.
get action happening for ourselves, which we eventually did.
No, you guys got signed before we did.
Yeah, but your record came out before us, I think.
Not the first one.
I remember when I was in this, I produced two songs from that record. I did not on that record, but two of the demos that ended up making the record for the Silent Majority. And I gotta get them for you, Alex, because they're really good. Rise Above is fantastic.
I'd love to.
And I play on all that stuff. I remember coming back. I was on tour. The record wasn't out yet.
Already.
Yeah, and Rick and Chris Stan, the singer from Life, Sex, and Death, said, "Hey man, my father just passed away. I'm looking for someone to help me produce a couple of songs. Will you help me?" And I just got home from on tour. I forgot who I was out with, but like Mr. Big or somebody like that. And I said, "Yeah, I can take time out." And I completely blew my family off on the 3 days that I was home to spend with them just to produce those couple songs. And then I went to Los Angeles. I was staying at the Oakwoods on Barham, and the guys from one of the rock bands, I got a brain cramp right now, metal band, came over to hang out with us. And they said, "Hey, man, you heard this new band called Life, Sex, and Death?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, I know who they are. I helped work on some of that record." He says, "These guys are going to be massive and huge." Metal Church, that's who the band was. They actually came by the studio just to borrow some pot, because they had no pot and they had no budget. And they were living across the hall with us. And we had Badlands in the same vicinity living with us. Bullet Boys were in there as well.
Oakwoods, right?
I'd hang out with all the bands. Yeah, Stevie Wonder's people were in the studio. Everybody was living at the Oakwoods on Barham at this time. And I heard a couple of the songs on the record, and I was completely blown away. I said, "Life, Sex, and Death is happening." We were just tickled pink that Alex took a chance and got things happening. If it wasn't for Alex, that band wouldn't have happened for sure, because he really hustled, was out in the streets working, doing all the interviews, and keeping the singer away from everything.
I mean, everybody contributed. Some of the things that were contributed were not in the best interest of the band, though.
Yeah, that's how all rock bands are, I think. So you guys were carrying the torch.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's classic fuck up move. Thank God we never have to worry about getting into another tax bracket. But they say that about like any band that's kind of like different and stuff. And it happened with Z'Nuff at first too. Once I was out of the band and these guys did get a record deal where, if you're different and it's hard to categorize you, you get called the next big thing. And more often than not, obviously, it doesn't end up happening. But it doesn't mean that you should stop playing music or stop enjoying it or stop appreciating the people that do appreciate what it is that you do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when I was younger, I would have been like, "Oh, I want to be Slash." Well, it started with it started with Rick Nielsen, and it still is basically. So
Yeah.
never mind. But you know, and so it's about that, which is another sort of Midwestern trait where it's about the long haul. You know what I mean? And that's why you see so many dudes from the Midwest that are still doing relatively or fantastically well, because we just don't stop. We keep going, and it shows in the performance and the quality of the music and the longevity of the guys. I mean, look at all the dudes that came from our scene that are still out there working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just our shitty little fucking goofball scene in Chicago at the time, you know? So I don't know what the question was, but there's an answer.
Yeah, it was just about you guys meeting in those early years in the band. So kind of touching on that a little more, did some of those songs from that first album, were they formed during this time period when you were in the band? Do you remember some of those staples kind of coming to fruition?
Yeah, for sure. There was a bunch of them. Like if fortunately he chose to not listen to me, but like New Thing, I had a much different arrangement idea in mind that, you know, Chip was like, no, that's stupid. And it turns out he was absolutely right. But like For Now and Baby Loves You and In the
Okay.
Groove and I, you know, where it was actually, I mean, first of all, let me say this. Tori's my favorite guitar player. I love Tori, not only as a person and a friend and a brother, but as a musician. This guy is absolutely fucking ridiculous.
He's
Right?
great.
I mean,
I just picked up that the Repaint album that he put out,
it's,
CD, and it's fantastic. I'm doing all the vocals on
it,
it as well.
and he's like up there with Paul Gilbert and any of those fucking guys, at least from where I come from as a guitar player. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But so one of the most fun things was, you know, that riff in Baby Loves You, ba-da-da-da-da, right? So that was one of my contributions to that tune, and it sort of became systemic to the thing. So if you're going to play that song, that's part of the song now, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
And, you know, when Chip first invited me back, you know, Tori was doing it, and, you know, at one sound check, I was like, hey, dude, you know, I wrote that bit, and is there any way that I can take it back, just because it's kind of weird me seeing you do my parts while I'm over here brushing my teeth. And he was like, yeah, sure, man, that's okay, because I've never heard anybody play it right. And to which my response was, and it was the only dig I ever took, but I did take it. I go, well, that's not because you guys don't play it how I wrote it.
That's right.
Chip was like,
We did all those demos.
He acted just like that. But
And we did all those demos, and Enuff Z'Nuff did all those recordings in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, at a place called Royal Recorders. There should be some kind of a small book that's out talking about Jane's Addiction and Tapao, Survivor, Cheap Trick, Adrian Blue and the Bears, Skid Row. Everyone was in there making records. It was a beautiful studio with a nice SSL console in there, a nice G Series
Cinderella
console.
was there too.
Cinderella, and yeah, we all hung out together at that studio.
Yeah.
And every time they had the big Monsters of Rock festival, everybody would come by and stay there. It was called the Americana. That was the hotel. Inside of it was, in the far end of the hotel was the Royal Recorders studio. And I'm telling you, a lot of magic was made in there. Kingdom Come would hang out in there. Van Halen was by there. All the big bands would come by the studio and check it out. It's a wonderful place to be creative. We all had a great time there. And there's if those walls can talk of all the promiscuity and substance abuse that went on over there, it was unbelievable. Even for Enuff Z'Nuff sessions, we'd start our recordings after Skid Row would leave the studio. We'd go in the studio at 2:00 in the morning. My buddy would show up from the Beachmasters Blackjack Club with an ounce of cocaine and a bunch of booze and girls, and expect us to get work done because we had to be out of there by 7 in the morning. But we would track those songs, and I think the guys did a fabulous job out there. We were young, and we weren't scared of anything, and there was no rules or no regulations. We just wanted to play rock and roll, and we wanted to get our songs on tape, and then we would record the songs, and then we give them to our constituents, whoever was in the studio hanging out with us, whether it was the guys in Cinderella or Adrian Blue and the Bears, and say, hey, man, what do you think of this new stuff we have? Until eventually Doc McGee came into the studio one day, and he says, Chip, I got 3 cassettes, the repeat cassettes. That's what the big thing was back then. In my car, he goes, 2 of them are Enuff Z'Nuff. I got a friend named Derek Shulman over at Atco Records. They just gave him his own imprint. He used to be from Polygram, and he's responsible for signing Cinderella and Bon Jovi. And I think he'd be interested in you guys. And we said, oh, man, thanks, Doc. We appreciate it. He's a Chicago lad, just like we are. And lo and behold, a couple weeks later, we're doing a showcase for major labels. That's how things go in this game. You get a break, take advantage of it. If someone says to you, hey, can you do this job? Even if you can't do it, say yeah, and then learn.
Nice.
Absolutely. Exactly what he said. Anybody out there that's like coming up, well, Brandon, you're fearless that way. I've noticed that, and I respect that immensely. I want to say as well. You know, we just know each other in this context, really, and you know what I mean. And like I hear the music, and you know, I got to work on the music too. But you've got the right ethos, the right, you know what I mean? Like you'll just get it done and figure out how to do it after you've said, yeah, like I can do that.
I appreciate it. But that was actually one of the things that I had written down that I wanted to ask you about. Is there any memories that specifically stick out from recording that debut album out there at Rural Recorders in Lake Geneva?
Let me do one. Let me do the one about the rolling the joint out of the Bible.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
It's a little sacrilegious, but
no, this sounds great. This sounds great. Go for it.
It was because Chip was handling the business and he was dealing with management and labels and all of the you know, and he already had real responsibility in his life with his family and stuff like that. And me and Donnie didn't have any sense of, the only thing I think we've either really ever been responsible about is completely avoiding responsibility, but it's not easy to do, but so far so good. We're batting 1,000 in that regard. But so anyway, cause Chip was doing all the work and the heavy lifting and making sure that the shit sounded good and was supervising the mixes and stuff. Me and Donnie would be, I mean, I think I was basically like a Donnie wrangler, but I mean, we were, cause I would never get as extreme as he would, you know what I mean? So there, I was like half Chip, half Donnie. So we always kind of got put together, you know what I mean? So we were like roomies and all of that stuff when we were at this hotel that Chip's talking about with the studio in it. And I don't know if anybody knows this or not, but Enuff Z'Nuff does smoke pot. You know, I realize it's pretty edgy, you know, but
hey, well, I'm broadcasting from Kentucky. It's illegal here. You can't talk about it, man. No, I'm just kidding.
No, actual like cooking pans is what I'm referring to.
Nice.
But so anyway, so we didn't have rolling papers, and we were going to roll a joint, and you know, Donnie's more extreme than I am, and he goes, "I have it. Let's use the Bible." Okay. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a real good idea. And I'm not like, you know, in any way religious, but it just kind of seems like, well, you don't do that. You know, that just seems wrong somehow. Anyway, it didn't stop us. We did it. We smoked the joint. We had a couple of girls with us. And one thing that would always happen is that Donnie would do some kind of, you know, borderline criminal activity, like riding a horse through a drive-through was one example.
Oh, wow.
And so on this occasion, he wanted to steal a paddle boat because the studio and the hotel that housed the studio were right off a lake, right? So, all right, so we got these two girls, and, you know, Donnie has larceny in mind, and we've just smoked a joint made out of Bible. And so he somehow manages to break through this chain that these paddle boats have. And I'm like, well, figures. I don't know how he did that. I mean, is he Houdini or what? But he did, and the thing was free. So we pushed the two-seater paddle boat onto this little lake, and you know, there's no running water, so it's all moss and seaweed, and you know, it's got a dirty ground underneath it because it's not moving anywhere. Anyway, so the four of us get on the two-person paddle boat, and we get about halfway into the lake as we're heading for the island in the middle of the lake when we notice, hey, we're starting to sink.
Oh shit.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we said. And and I don't know who thought of it first, but it was like, guys, let's get the fuck out of this thing and just swim to shore, and that way, whatever, we're not, you know, it just seems like now's the time to bail. So the four of us jump out of the thing, and I swim to shore, and you know, as I'm getting closer to the shore, I'm like, man, it's getting harder, but because that's where all the seaweed and the stuff was closer to the surface, right? The girl that I was with, I believe, was a swimmer, so she didn't actually have a problem. And the girl that Donnie was with made it as well. So now the three of us are on the shore, but there's no Donnie.
Oh, man.
Exactly what I said. I think there was a lot of fucks and stuff like that in there. And I'm like, all right, breathe, stay chill, because freaking out isn't going to. So I'm like, hey, Donnie, trying to not be like, ah! And run into the hotel room to see if he might be there. Of course he's not. I come running back out, and now the panic is set in. I'm like, Donnie, I'm yelling now, and it's fucking 2:00 in the morning, and we just stole a paddle boat and sunk it in the river. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, okay, do not draw attention. Anyway, so I'm yelling now at this point, and I don't know what the fuck to make of anything. And I'm like, holy shit, what do we do? So we went back to the hotel room, and there he was. And what had happened was the seaweed and stuff had caught him and gotten tangled on his legs and hands and pulled him under.
Oh, shit.
Right? So he was literally almost drowning, and we're all like, holy fuck, dude, that really would have sucked for recording and stuff. But anyway, after he tells me the story of what happens, then he goes, and I am never going to roll a joint out of the Bible ever again. And I know for a fact to this day, it's never happened. He's never resorted to that again. That was like literally the one thing in his life where he did learn his lesson. It was pretty funny.
Oh, man, that's fucking great. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome as fuck.
I wish I.
Yeah, we got in a lot of trouble for that too, because during that recording session, not only were we very out of hand, we were not very well behaved. Skid Row was in the studio making their record, and we heard their stuff, and we were like, we can beat this, we think. And it was a solid record, obviously. Sold
Great record.
a lot of copies, but we thought that we could do a lot better in a lot of different ways outside of the recording. One of them was our behavior, which is stealing horses, going through Burger King parking lots, ordering food, and then bringing the horse inside the hotel and letting them come into our room, which is crazy, folks. You get a chance to steal a horse is one thing, and then bring it into your hotel room is another. And we found ourselves in a predicament that where if we didn't shape up, we were going to find ourselves thrown out not only of the studio and the hotel, but off our management as well. But for some reason, they would look at us as it was good. It was their behavior was embraced by them. The bad behavior, they enjoyed us getting in trouble because they could do the same thing because they were management was living their lives vicariously through the band. So at the end of that record, when everything was said and done, Alex recorded all those songs, by the way. He did all that recording. At the end, when everything was said and done, and Alex ended up going out and putting his band back together, we basically had to start over again. And I think we did a good job. At the end of the day, when you listen to that record, and if you listen to the stuff that Alex did with us, it's very, very similar. There's not a lot of change. A little bit of different guitar playing because Derek Frigo, that is, and Alex Kane both had their own timbre on guitars. But for the most part, though, the template was pretty much intact from how those songs were initially written.
And it's weird too how much muscle memory came. Like once Chips, invited me to come play with the guys again, I'm like, oh fuck, now I got to learn all these tunes which was, he calls me, I believe it was on a Tuesday. And incidentally, the guy that I replaced, Tony, we're all still really good buddies with, and he just had his own shit that he needed to accomplish, you know what I mean? And this is prior to the pandemic, obviously. But we're all still really good friends, and we stay in touch. And the same regard that Chip and I have over the 35 years since I played with him, But so here I was faced with it. He called me, I believe it was on maybe a Tuesday or a Sunday or something like that. And he was like, hey, this and that with Tony and blah, 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 blah. So, what are you doing? Would you be interested? And I love the guys. I love Tori. He's one of my best friends. He's my favorite guitar player, on and on. Great band, great songs, great legacy, lots of work, record deal. You know what I mean? Where is there anything not to get into? You know what I mean? It's all like, oh yeah, the MORC cruise. Sure. Fuck yeah. Let's, and the other thing is like when we, we'll be doing 8-hour drives, and it's kind of ridiculous to say, but we're in the whatever vehicle we're in at the moment. And we're sitting there, the four of us and Beasley, who's really the fifth of us, and we're just giggling, hanging out for like 8 hours. It's really weird, the lack of bitching that's involved, But so he calls.
Yeah, a lot of respect in the band. We all respect each other a lot. We knew it was the move to make at that time. And we knew Tony was going to be just fine. He gets get a chance to go back with his family. He was gone for months and months. He's got a couple of children. They needed his undying support, and that's why he went back to his family for a while. And Alex is the perfect guy. The only guy I thought about bringing back into the fold when Tony Fennell actually split. And by the way, Tony Fennell now is the lead singer of a band called One in Rome, and they're going out next year on a big major tour with Big Country and Boomtown Rats. So he's doing just fine. We still talk. He's got a song that he co-wrote with me on the last record called "I Got My Money Where My Mouth Is," and he's
nice,
playing guitar
great song.
fine. And everybody's real happy right now. Usually bands aren't like that. People are cantankers after years and years together, and then you split and you got nothing but bad things to say. But we all focus on the positive. We're just grateful to be out there making music and making records, and the stories are all part of it. I could write books and books on everything that Enuff Z'Nuff has done throughout our history right now, and to still be going right now is a miracle.
Yeah,
nice.
And the statute of limitations has run out on a bunch of
That's for sure. Very well said.
Yeah, so
nice.
now he is actually writing the book now.
Cool. Chip, one thing I wanted to ask you about, talking about your guys' second album, Strength, that came out in '91. What was the vibe at the record label kind of like? Because that was a really strong album, a great album, but, bands like Alice in Chains and Stone Temple Pilots and Nirvana had kind of broke in, and, that kind of music wasn't really at the forefront. What kind of vibes were you getting from the label around that time?
It was good. The label was the first record did very well. New Thing was a hit. MTV, 61 weeks in the charts. And then in 1990, we put out Fly on Michelle. That was a big hit for us, in the top 40 and Billboard. We had some action happen. There was some wings, and we were moving forward.
You got
this is
enrolled.
a great opportunity for us right here to go out and not only tour around the country and play these songs, but to really spread our wings. So when the record company said, you're going to get ready for your next record, Donnie and I were a writing machine then. We were coming up with tons of material. And that Strength album we recorded, we started over at One-on-One Studios in Los Angeles, but they only gave us like 4 days in the studio. They said that Alice in Chains was coming in. They had the studio booked, so we had to go somewhere else. And we ended up going a place called Music Grinder, where Donna Summers just did her record. And it just so happened that the guy that owns the studio was my babysitter. His wife babysat me when I was a little kid.
Nice.
In my hometown. It was unbelievable. So the first thing we did was we just started putting down the material. We bonded with everybody that worked there. We got Paul Lanny, who mixed the first Enuff Z'Nuff album, to come in and co-produce the album. And we just started putting down song after song. Every day we'd get to the studio. We lived at the Oakwoods on Barham. And Enuff Z'Nuff would get up we'd be up all night too with the guys in Badlands or Metal Church, just doing everything you could think of, and just out of control over there. And we would get up at 11 o'clock in the morning. Now, I don't know how we did it. Our manager, Bob Brigham, would get us up, him and Doc McGee. They'd somehow get us out of bed, and we'd go over there, and 6 days a week, we'd start laying down tunes, and we recorded 32 songs for that record. No record company assistance whatsoever. Derek Shulman didn't come down, our president. None of the A&R people showed up there. No publicists, nobody. Just the band really focusing on the task at hand, which is let's make a great record. And finally, at the end of the record, Derek Shulman showed up at the studio. And we had plenty of friends over there, by the way, that would visit us. Dweezil Zappa would come by and hang out with us.
Nice.
He loved the band. Guys in Cheap Trick. It was really a wonderful time for having friends over there and being creative. And after those 32 songs were recorded, Derek showed up at the studio and said, well, guys, we got a good problem here. And we said, what's that? If it's a problem. And he says, well, you got too many good songs. And it's too much information. We got to cut it down. So we took the best 15 songs and put them on the record. And then immediately embarked on a tour with Dee Snider and Twisted Sister. And we thought, hey, this is going to be a great opportunity for us. But right there, there was a whole change in the guard in the music business. And bands that came out that were considered rock bands or they didn't even have the hair metal back then. They weren't even talking about silly little titles like that because we weren't that. We were a pop, rock, alternative,
Yeah.
heavy metal. We were a big potpourri of everything. We were alternative before alternative. All those bands were falling to the wayside that were out when we were out, and it was the new change of the guard of Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Nirvana, that whole trip. So, where a lot of bands would have just said, okay, well, we had a nice little run. Let's just, go back to our day jobs. We considered it as a blessing and a challenge to stay in the game. And we went out there and toured around the country and played to good audiences and really did well. And the record actually did good, but it was a kind of a darker record for a lot of people, especially in considering what was out at that time. And I remember one of the big magazines that was doing an interview on the band, like Spin Magazine or somebody, I think it was Mark Blackwell, he gave us a wonderful review, 9 out of 10 stars, and said,
Oh, nice.
as great as this record is, will it be enough to lift the black cloud that follows this band? And I thought, God, this guy nailed it on the head. And even Kerrang! Magazine and the bigger publications over in Europe, same thing. Great reviews everywhere. We always been the critic darlings, which perhaps means lack of album sales. But we are still moving units, and we were playing shows that were great, really, very well attended. It was just a tough time for us. At the end of that record, those 32 songs, that we took and only put 15 on the record, we still had another 17 songs to use for future stuff, which we never seen an ending to what we started. We considered, failure perhaps wasn't in our vocabulary. Maybe it just means get it right the next time. And we finished that record, and the record company Atco Atlantic said, you guys did a great record. You have to go back in and do the next one now. By the way, you owe us $775,000. And we said, for what? If both records were gold records, why would we still owe money? And they said, oh, we had video budgets and of course, tour support. You had a bus, hotel rooms, promotion. I mean, they really did a lot for us. It was a wonderful label. And we thought to ourselves, well, we owe $750,000 on this record. Our managers at the time said maybe it's in our best interest to try to move on and try to find another home, and that's what we did. We looked at the paperwork, and there's a word on every contract that all the bands get, and it's called recoupable, which means you got to pay that money back. So
Yeah.
Management felt it was in our best interest to try to move on and maybe leave the label and go to another place. And the only way they would let us go is if we file a Chapter 7 as a band bankruptcy. And I talked the guys into doing that. And basically what that means is you body slam your creditors. And that's what we did. And we went in, we got Brad Blocken involved with our company, and we filed a Chapter 7. We got out of our deal. And not a month after that, Clive Davis heard a couple demo tapes that were recorded in my house and where I was living at the time, Beverly Hills, Illinois. And he loved them. A guy named Mitchell Cohen was the A&R guy. And he says, Clive, listen to this. And Clive says, get to Chicago and bring these guys in. I want to sign them right now. And I give Clive a lot of credit because he came down, he heard the songs. He goes, Chip, he goes, you guys have some great songs. It's really a throwback to the old days in a lot of ways. It's nothing like Motley Crue or Poison or Def Leppard, any of those bands. And those are all terrific groups. But you have your own timbre right here. And these songs, if it's 20 years, we're at a time right now where if the songs are 20 years or older, they're new again. And he loved that we had these pop songs, but played aggressively. I think he really embraced the pop side of the band. He says, I don't care what it takes to get those performances out of your brother, but get it done. And we just took those demo tapes, went over to CRC, Chicago Recording Company, and just started putting all the songs together until we had a great solid dozen-song record. Whereas Clive came to us right afterwards and said, hey, listen, I love what you guys are doing here, but I had a dream, and the perfect marriage is Enuff Z'Nuff and Richie Zito, who was the guitar player in Elton John's band. And he also produced Heart and Cheap Trick and Poison and a bunch of other bands. And so I sent the demos to Los Angeles to Richie Zito for that record. And Richie heard the stuff and he thought, man, this is terrific. He goes, Chip, I'm supposed to co-produce 4 of these songs in a record, and you guys have already started. And I said, Richie, how about if we do this? How about if I just send you the demos and then you listen to them, and if they're not up to snuff and up to what you think would be a strong record, we'll just start over again in Los Angeles and do everything again. And he goes, okay, it's fair enough, send them to me. And I sent him a DAT tape of the songs, and then the next morning he called me and says, I heard the stuff, it's fabulous, bring it out here and let's just finish the record out here.
Nice. And one last thing I wanted to touch on before we kind of jumped into the new album a little more. I read an interesting blog from on Donnie's website talking about working with Clive Davis and the whole showcase with BMG. Would you mind telling the story about the showcase through from your point of view, if you don't mind?
The showcase you're talking about for Atlantic Records, correct?
Oh, okay. I just know it was the one with Clive Davis.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So Clive, there was no showcase. He heard the demo tapes, right? Loved it. We went in the studio, started recording the record, and then we had a big meeting with Clive. We were going to get together with all his constituents and go over the idea of putting an album out with Arista Records. The night before, Donnie says, I'm going to go out and hang out with some buddies of mine. And I said, bro, we got an 8 o'clock meeting over at Arista. I think it's in your best interest to stay here with us, bro. We'll hang out. He goes, I'm not staying in here. I'm going out tonight. And he went out and he got arrested that night with drugs at some club. So the next morning when we showed up at the Clive Davis meeting, Clive says, where's Donnie? And we said, his grandfather's fallen ill. He flew back to Chicago to take care of it. And I had to step up that day, even though I wasn't the front man of the band. I still was. It was like Nielsen and Xander, him and I, if I had to be analytical. And Clive loved our disposition. He loved the way we carried ourselves. He loved Vicky Fox, who shared the meeting as well. Okay. And he ended up sitting in front of his constituents saying, "Folks, welcome Enuff Z'Nuff to our company. The new signing, there'll be the head of our rock department," and he really gave us a lot of kudos. And then we went in and our first showcase was at a place called the Copacabana, and we played there with him, and it was absolutely
I think the audio cut out.
Yeah, it was going direction wise.
There it is.
And then I guess what happened was, after that Copacabana gig, we took pictures with Clive, which he never does with any of his constituents. We hung out all night with him and the whole team, Mitchell Cohen, everybody was involved there. Our publicist that was there at the time, Kathy Swan, and Jonathan Gravatt. It was a bunch of great people that were there that really believed in the band. And they set up another showcase for us over at the Roxy in Los Angeles. So Enuff Z'Nuff was going to show up at the Roxy. We're going to do a show with a bunch of other bands on the label. And, Clive went up there before we went up on stage and says, at 20 million, we got Whitney Houston, and all the people clapped. It sold out, jam-packed at the Roxy, by the way, that night. And he named a couple other bands that were on there. That was Kenny G and a couple other artists that were really big. And he says, he gets ready to introduce the band. And Donnie sneaks up on stage, barefoot with painted toenails and dressed up like he's in Motley Crue with a dozen flowers and sticks them between Clive's legs as Clive's announcing the bands. And Clive says, he looks down, sees the flowers. He goes, well, I guess everything's coming up roses. I want to introduce the cornerstone of our rock department here at Arista Records. Put your hands together for Enuff Z'Nuff. And basically, he was hoping he was going to get a Beatles meets Raspberries show, and instead he got Motley Crue meets Guns N' Roses, and he wasn't very happy about that. And that started the ball rolling downhill. We had a publishing deal before that too, as well, with EMI Records for $500,000 for the album. And after that showcase, the guy at EMI went up to our manager, Bob Brigham, and Herbie Herbert was managing the band at the time too, because Doc McGee had a lot of things that he was working with as far as Bon Jovi and Scorpions, some of the bands that were on his roster, and he had to give them the time, and he felt that those artists felt that we were taking away too much of his precise time to help us out. So he had to pass the band over to Herbie Herbert, and Herbie said that night, he goes, the EMI people said that there's not a chance the Enuff Z'Nuff's going to come back after this debacle. and
Oh,
there's no
wow.
way you're going to get the help that you need from Arista Records. We're moving on. And everybody was scared to death of us because we're a band that had a propensity to get in trouble at any single moment. And we showed it right there at this huge showcase in front of Clive. But they didn't give up on the band. We went up, we got a tour bus, we went on tour, we started working the record. It sold some units. We were doing well. Now, if I think that record did about 300,000 units. In this day and age, I'd be hailed beyond belief right now for selling that many units. But back then,
Yeah.
sold under 500,000 units, it was considered a failure. But we wouldn't take that. That word's not in our vocabulary. We just worked that record as much as we could, went out on tour with everybody you could think of, whether it was Cheap Trick or Def Leppard or Poison. We took every single gig that was out there. And eventually we got a really good tour. We hooked up with Poison on their only tour they ever did over in the UK. We had 5 shows with them, and we went out and supported them on that whole debacle of a tour. I thought we did a fine job on it, but it just wasn't enough to lift that black cloud, as the guys in Spin Magazine said, away from us. So when we finished that record, we said, we went back to the label, and the label said, well, you guys owe us right now $500,000. You want to do your next record? We had an 8-album deal with Arista, and it was Herbie Herbert that said, there's no way we can make 1 penny on this band unless we sell 3 million albums. We have to leave that label as well. And that was the start of Downhill Spiral.
Word. Dude, thanks for sharing that story. That's some great insight to that.
And that's the truth, okay?
Hey, we trust you, Chip.
I
Alex.
was there for every single moment of that stuff. I remember them all, every little detail on it. My manager at the time, Bob Brigham, who worked in conjunction with Herbie Herbert, he's like Rain Man. He knows it all. And it's all going to be a part of my book when it comes out. Every little story, every little nuance, I want it all exposed. I don't have just a book. I have a movie.
Nice. Well, I can't wait to get my hands on that whenever it comes out. Alex, jumping down to you, what was your relationship with Chip kind of like over there? Because there was like a 30-year period that you weren't in the band. Were you guys still, friends like you are now?
Well, I mean, I would say we're tighter now only because, I mean, we were always cool with each other. Why the dog's barking, I don't know. But luckily the dog is barking. We never stopped being friends. And like he had said before, there was never sort of any kind of acrimonious breakup or, blah, blah, blah. We just don't. We never related to each other as anything other than friends and, guys that like the same kind of music. So and which is another thing, like everybody at home knows this too. Like, there's certain people in your tribe that are like, yeah, I'm totally into Pantera. And if you're totally into Pantera, you're just like a little more in that person's, tribe. And so we had Cheap Trick and the Beatles, and he blew up again. So there were so many, we had so many things in common anyway, aside from both of us having been in Enuff Z'Nuff. So we always maintained the friendship. But you know what it's like. I mean, once you're out there and working, you're focused entirely on trying to get out there and get your music out there and get as many people into it. So we would see each other at like, charity events or, different things, just whatever, backstage at somebody's gig or whatever. But we were always friends and always cool with each other. There was never any sort of, negativity involved in relationship.
No, and then later on, of course, in 2000, after we had a bunch of albums under our belt and Alex left Life, Sex, and Death, he had another band called Anti-Product, and we chose them to go out with us and do a tour.
Oh, nice.
And that was good. It helped us reacquaint ourselves, all of us together, and talk about the past, hanging out at the houses, at the apartments and driving around and awful vehicles and just trying to get the rehearsals. And there was just great moments in the studio recording and being creative where we all tripped each other's trigger. And then things started really getting much better, and we were excited about that. And we knew that we had something special there. And those tours were not easy, okay? We're over in England. We're all traveling in vans. It's not tour buses anymore. It's crew and band both together in a van, all the gear piled in there. That's how bad we wanted to play and go see the fans every single night. And we did 15, 20 shows on those tours. come back home. We have no money. We were broke beyond belief. We just barely made it through just to get to fly over to England and come back there. We basically paid for expenses. That's about it. But boy, there was wonderful moments on those runs. And we really got a chance to heal any wounds that we may have had in the past.
Nice.
It was funny too, because that was like the first that was when I was an anti-product over in England, right? And anti-product had its own thing that was kind of starting to, get a little bit of steam and whatever. So both bands brought something to the table for sure. But what was really interesting was, though, even though I was with my new family, the anti-product family, how quickly, particularly with Chip and Donnie, like the relationships basically picked up, from where they'd left off. Like, for all I know, Chip finished a sentence that was like the last thing that he was saying, the 30 years before or whatever. So immediately our friendships and our relationships just found their own equilibrium, just like they had in the past. And I was literally reminded, and Anti-Product was going through a tough phase then, because if you remember, Chip, we literally had all of our shit stolen right before the tour started.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was literally everything. They took the van to steal the van, and then they found a band's gear in there. The merch, everything, guitar picks, strings, we had nothing left. But I will say this about England. Even though Anti-Product, as the name would lead you to believe, was a little bit not really concerned with the mainstream, and we were just going to do our things on, Planet Anti-Product. And so while it did have a polarizing thing, the thing that I do want to say is the amount of people, both, friends, fans, other bands, people I didn't know particularly well, the industry, everybody in England just about came to the rescue of Anti-Product, and they were helping us out either by giving us money and that was actually when we'd already been fan funding at that time. So we went right back to the fans, and they helped us get through the tour and everything like that. So that's just my way of being grateful. But for a country that won't let you hit the ground, I mean, they will talk shit about you until they pass out. But if it looks like you're about to fail, you will not be allowed to fail. They will be there to catch you. But the point being, and not only immediately was I reminded of our friendships, but also how great the band was, how great the band sounds, how truly well written that material was, and how if you played it in 1987, or if you played it in 2000, or if you played in 2020, a great song is a great song. It's just like when you hear fucking "You Shook Me All Night Long" or whatever, getting back to DC, whatever DC song trips your trigger. These songs, these Enuff Z'Nuff songs that the guys made, are just as valid today as then, and maybe even a little more so now, because the quality of the actual craftsmanship of songwriting with the computer, you just copy paste, and you're not fucking making, you know what I mean? You're making product, whereas maybe Chip and I come from a thing where we want to be commercially viable, but we do view music as an art form. So, copy pasting a bunch of shit just to get done is not how we do it,
Yeah.
No, and I got to tell you, on the beginning, on that tour with Anti-Product, very well attended, great crowds. A lot of it has to do with Anti-Product, because Alex was one of the guys that helped develop crowdfunding before there was any crowdfunding. He was one of the first guys that came through, if not the first.
It was
said,
called
"Here's what we're going
begging."
to do," and he took that approach.
Seriously.
He put it all together, and we watched what he did. And he was great at selling the merchandise, and those crowds were fabulous. I mean, we were playing rooms that some of them were 200-300 seaters, very small, but they were packed with people, and everybody wanted to get a piece of the action. And the big thing on the tour was, when's Alex going to join Enuff Z'Nuff again? Everybody was asking me every single night. They wanted him back into the game. And his band came out of the box, lipstick, makeup, real flamboyant, all the accessories. I mean, if you see Alex Kane in handcuffs, he really looks good in handcuffs, okay? He knows exactly how to wear them. And the people were excited about that. When they came out to the shows, it wasn't just about hearing the music. They wanted to see a rock show. And that was really, really gratifying for me because I thought, you know what, he's still keeping the game up there. He's up there fronting every single night, singing these songs. Very, very difficult job to hold that and to be comfortable there. But he was very, very astute and knew every single night that it wasn't just about singing for 2 hours a night to the crowd, but it was a chance to go meet them because of the crowdfunding and sell merchandise and kiss hands and shake babies. And he was really good about doing that. And I did the same thing too. We both were hardworking guys. Every single interview we would do, all the press that would come out to the shows. I remember a couple of times going out to these press junkets that we would have, and Alex would just be, they were just there to see anti-product, and Alex would pull me and go, hey man, come on, you want to do an interview? So, he always wasn't afraid to share, and I thought that was very commendable of him. And at the end of the tours, we were barely getting by with as far as food and cocktails, whatever we needed to do to get by. I think we were very focused on just the task at hand, which was, let's just keep this choo-choo train going as long as we can. As long as we can break even, it's a success. And England always loved what Alex and I have done. And it was only fitting that that tour has led us to this point right now where he's back into the band after all these years and kicking ass beyond belief. And the fans love to see the shows. And that's what you get when you come see Enuff Z'Nuff show. It's a 4-ring circus. So be excited to go see a band. It's not going to stand like 4 cigar store Indians. We're going to give you a great show along with these solid songs that we've written. And you get a concert. That's what it's all about nowadays. No tapes, no sequencers, no guys backstage. Just a real rock and roll show. All the bells and whistles.
One of the most fun things about being back in the band, and make no bones about it, I mean, we kind of might look a little bit goofy here and there or whatever, say some things that don't make it sound like we got graduated from MI or whatever. But, the guys in Z'Nuff, they're as good a player as you're going to find anywhere in any band. I mean, they're all remarkable musicians.
Absolutely.
And the particularly one thing I love so much is the communication that Tori and I have, where, there's certain solos that I generally do, and there's other solos that, he does because he's been doing them for 15 years or however long the guys have been together. But he's very, very generous, so there's never anything weird there. And literally, like, we just kind of look at each other as to who's taking a particular solo. You know what I mean? Like sometimes, like we back off the mic when we're singing, and then we look at each other before the solo, and it's like, nah, you go ahead. I don't feel like it tonight, or whatever. So there's this constant sort of communication and improvisation, and Chip will play something a little bit different, and then that'll make me go a little bit differently somewhere. It's still the song for sure, but maybe it's just a feeling, or maybe I do like a little guitar harmony with them, a la Cheap Trick or something. So there's this constant sort of vivid communication that's going on. Even if we are playing a song everybody knows, everybody's still talking to each other, maybe using different words, but the sentence means the same thing.
Nice.
Chip's going to his house now.
I know. I'm loving this virtual tour we're getting of Chip's house. This is great.
All I got is bondage gear on the wall. So I don't know who's watching.
Perfect. Chip, kind of bouncing back to you. I know in interviews that you do, you're not shy about the fact that it's you 4 guys. There's really no crew when you guys go out and do the show. You're in the vehicle traveling together. Sometimes, like you said, 7-8 hours to these gigs. Did the
Chip will drive a lot, dude.
Nice. Did the comfortability of this hanging out like that and the whole band together, did that help play a role in getting back into the studio for this album?
Well, if I had my own way, I'm not going to lie to you. I'd rather be on the Oscar Minor Wiener Wagon or a tour bus as opposed to touring around in a van. But yeah, I like the camaraderie. I like us all together. How we're going to do that in the future, it's going to be a challenging way to navigate for all of us. I got to be honest with you. But I have a tour bus for us, so in the future, so I think we're in pretty good shape. Got a couple of tour buses, and I know that we have a tour scheduled for, if I'm not mistaken, it'll be July or June, I should say, June 11th of 2020. We go out in the quarantine tour with Faster Pussycat and Enuff Z'Nuff. And maybe there'll be another band on there too. And I know we have some dates coming up with a few of the Rose Tattoo and a few other bands as well. And then they got festivals that are happening. So, next year it's still all up in the air what's going to happen for all the bands, not just us. But when I talk to my friends in Live Nations or AEG, they all say that everything's starting up around August or September of next year for the big shows. So perhaps maybe some of the smaller shows will be able to slip through the cracks and go out and play. But it's too soon to tell right now. So everybody's recording. We're all sequestered in our studios. Tori just put out his record Motherload, which is fabulous. And then he's doing another Black 7 record with his other project.
It's a great album.
But he's jonesing to get out with Enuff Z'Nuff. And I know Dan Benjamin Hill, he's got another project he's doing right now with some friends of his out in Los Angeles. He does a lot of movies and soundtrack work too.
Okay.
So, very talented cat. And so I think between all of us and Alex, of course, producing records all the time, I believe that everybody will have a lot of work underneath their belt by the time we get out and tour again. And we'll have some new material as well for the fans, which is, I think, pretty exciting. I know it is for me because at the end of the day, Enuff Z'Nuff makes records for ourselves. And if we like them and they stand the test of time, we pass them on to you guys.
And Brainwashed Generation is a fantastic record. I thoroughly enjoy everything that's on it. So kind of diving into that, the opening track is a rework of an older Enuff Z'Nuff tune from way back in the day. Whose idea was it to bring that one back into the fold?
I thought it'd be nice to do something nice for the fans. And Donnie and I, obviously, we've had our trials and tribulations, but I've never had any bad things to say about him. He's a fabulous songwriter that I hope one day the world sees that he's one of the finest singers of our generation. Right up there with the big league guys. I watched those performances. I produced those records. The guy sang those songs 1 or 2 times. That's it. He just nailed it beyond belief. And he's the quintessential singer. There's not about that. He can turn a melody line as good as anybody. And I thought that on this record, it'd be nice to have him with me on a song. So I wasn't sure if I could get him, if I could find the time because he was doing a solo record. So I re-recorded the song the right way for the first time. And of course I recorded it in low D as opposed to, was it E in a long time, because when we wrote it, we were kids. I knew there was not a chance I was going to be singing that song live if I had to record it the same way. So I took a different approach to it. And I kept Alex's guitar riff in there too. I didn't really touch it much of the song. I just left it alone the way it was and just went in there and bashed it out live. And I think that really sparked something in Donnie, because I called him on the phone. I said, I re-recorded Fatal Attraction, but it's called Fatal Distraction. And people are going to hail it, bro. This is as solid as a rock song. It's got Bowie, Cheap Trick.
It's a fantastic
It's got
song.
elements of everything in there. And he says, man, it makes me happy that you did that, Chip. He goes, why don't we go a little step further for the fans? Why don't we do one song fresh and new that I think would be, something that they really would grab onto. And so he sent me a track of 3 songs. And Donnie he's such a prolific writer. I heard the tracks. Every song was great, but there was one in there particularly that I thought was perfect for the record, called Strangers in My Head. And I called him back. I said, I think this is the track. We should take this idea and run with it. And he says, great, man. Do your thing to it and send it back to me. And that's what I did. I played some guitar on it. And of course, I played bass on it and then sang. And then I sent it back to him. And he went to his friend, a good buddy of ours out in Las Vegas, Nevada, a guy named Vinny Castaldo. Okay. And wonderful drummer, producer, great guy. And we did a lot of recordings over there. As a matter of fact, I worked with him on a bunch of different projects. And he said, he goes, yeah, give me a couple days and I'll mix this up for you guys. And there we go. We had a brand new song for the fans to hear Donnie and I back together, exposing everything that we from that started this whole band and started our relationship together. I think people were pleasantly surprised to hear that there was no more slinging mud and that the 2 brothers were getting along together again and we can make this work. Everybody was really happy. There was less disrespectful messages on social media about how we both should get together. Nobody knows what we went through. We don't know anybody anything. We've been playing music for 30 years plus together. And it was only fitting that sometimes, as I mentioned earlier in the interview, it takes time for wounds to heal. and music is the common denominator right there. As soon as we recorded together, everything went away. He was happy about it. I was happy as well. We ended up talking about his solo record, and he goes, "Hey, would you come down and play bass on one of the songs called Party that I have?" I said, "I'd love to do that." He goes, "What do I owe you?" I said, "Nothing. If it wasn't for you, no one would know me. If it wasn't for me, no one would know you. It's two guys together that love each other. Got too much of a history to hold any grudges. Let's just make it happen." I ended up shooting the video for Party, by the way, too, which Donnie's solo record called Beautiful Things. It'll come out in the end of December. And
Nice.
we'll both be in a video together. He's got the guys from Jellyfish on the record, too, and
Oh, wow.
Greg Potter
Okay.
playing drums on it. It's really good. He's done a wonderful job, and he's not interested in getting in the van and going out and touring around the country right now. On the other hand, I'm stupid enough to want to embrace that. I want to go play songs. I want an audience out there. I want to get these people to hear our records. A lot of old fans and a ton of old friends out there. Millions of people know who Enuff Z'Nuff is, and I'm going to keep the choo-choo train going until we have coal. When the coal disappears and it's time to go, that's it. There's still gas in this tank.
Yeah, and I love the track from the new album that you put out, "Strangers in My Head," and I thought it was kind of fitting and awesome how, the melody in this is kind of chaotic in the chorus. It's very chaotic was like the first word that really jumped in my head whenever I hear it. It's a fantastic song, but that melody is, and all the layering parts into it just kind of create this awesome dark sound, but it's still, the lyrics are a little more uplifting than the chaotic music would kind of lead on to believe. But I thought you guys did a fantastic job on that
I
song.
appreciate that. No, I think he's a king of melodies, that's for sure. He's got a wonderful sense of balance. I think that what was great about when we did the record, not only did it heal both of us, but it opened up a dialogue for maybe some more interpretations in the future, and maybe putting some more songs on a record. And I think that's a nice little thing at the end of the day. And we're both real good. We're in a nice place right now. Of course, we're going through some unprecedented times right now, but we're staying busy. He's at his studio recording here in Chicago. I'm at my studio as well. We're moving forward. I think it's good. I'm looking forward to what the future holds. Anything is possible as long as we're here.
Yeah, and I've heard his record that he put out last year. It's fantastic, and like I said, "Strangers in My Head" is one of my favorite tracks off of the new Brainwashed Generation album. So it's nice to see both you guys putting out quality material.
The one thing I love about the record, it's a washed, and just, it really shines nice under a black light, and it oozes in sexuality. This song's it's about everyday experiences that we went through, and perhaps the audience as well. I think all the songs have been structured. It's not a far departure from Enuff Z'Nuff, but yet it shows a different side, obviously, with me fronting the band and singing the songs. But at the end of the day, when you listen to the material, you go, "Hey, sounds like Enuff Z'Nuff to me."
Yeah.
And the songs really translate great live as well. So you'll hear some of these songs in concert, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised how punchy and powerful they are. And I'll put us up at any band playing show with anybody out there when it comes to songs, because we're as heavy as you can be when we need to be, and we're light as well. We can show the pop side of us, and those are good elements that all rock bands should carry.
Of course. Going back to the opening track, it features Dax Nilsson from Cheap Trick on drums. And there's a nod in the beginning of it. It's the "Clock Strikes 10" guitar part. Was that on there before Dax was playing on the track, or did that get added after he got put on the track?
No, of course it was on there. I called Zach on the phone, and the only reason I called Zach was I love his drumming, and he's a wonderful guy, and I'm close to his family as well. But when we got back from Australia, Alex and I couldn't get the guys together to come out and finish their parts, because everybody was paranoid about what was happening out there, and nobody wanted to move there. All just wanted to stay in their house and stay handcuffed for the time being until we knew we were safe. So I called Dax on the phone and said, "Dax, I have an album called Brainwashed Generation, brand new Enuff Z'Nuff stuff. I'd be honored to have you on it. Your father's played on a bunch of Enuff Z'Nuff songs on our past records. Xander's been on my solo record. He sang on All Day and All the Night. It's only fitting that you come down and play on it." And he goes, "Chip, I'd love to." And so he drove to Chicago. We went in the studio, and he said, "What do you want me to play?" And I didn't tell him anything. I said, I want your interpretation, bro." And of course, I might have, hummed a couple things to him, but for the most part, I left it alone. And he knew exactly what to do. And he loved all the songs.
It's
He
great.
would have played on the whole record. He played on half the album, and then he went home. He says, "If you need me for more, let me know. I'll play on all of them, Chip." And I called my guy, Dan Hill, and I just said, "Dan, I got Dax to finish the record. I have to turn this in to Frontiers. I didn't want to have to get outside guys to do the record, but I thought maybe it was my best interest. Otherwise, I was going to be penalized." And the label wanted the record to put it out no matter what was happening in the world. They wanted new music, and quite frankly, so did the fans. So he played on those 5. I got Dan to come down and finish on a few of them, but I ended up getting my cousin too, Mike Portnoy from Dream Theater, and formerly from Dream Theater, the Winery Dogs and Sons of Apollo, and
Yeah.
so many bands. He could be in the Guinness World Book of Records, all the groups he's worked with. And he was cousins on my wife's side of the family. And he said, we sent him an email, and he sent me an email back. He says, "Chip, usually I get paid very well to do these records, but considering your family with me now, I'll do it for you. Send me the tracks." And I sent him a couple
Nice.
songs, and he picked one of the songs to play on. It's a
All
song
in
called
Vain.
"It's All in Vain" that I wrote out when I was in Europe. And he did a wonderful job, and he brought his own Ringo kit out there. He has his old Ringo Starr drum kit that he uses on any of his Beatles stuff.
Nice.
And 1 or 2 takes, sent it right back to me. It was fabulous. Producer I had in the studio who was engineering the record and mixing the record, a guy named Chris Stymons. He's got a studio called Stonecutter Studios in Chicago. The guy's fabulous. He's worked with Alice Cooper and Ozzy Osbourne
Everybody.
and White Lion and Styx and Enuff Z'Nuff. He does tons of different bands. I'm not giving him enough justice. He's just a fabulous producer writer. He did the whole Revenge record for Kiss.
Oh, wow.
He
Nice.
was the guy that was responsible for taking those tracks and mixing them up and then mastering it for us. And we put together a great record. We sent Brainwashed Generation to him. And I remember the first week it came out, I looked out on Amazon, and we were in the top 20 with AC/DC and Journey and Queen and all the big bands. I was like, you know what? We did something right here.
Nice.
But unfortunately, we can't tour to go support the record. But I could do all my interviews. I could stay busy that way. And between Tori Stoffregan, Dan, and
What's his name?
of course, Alex, and along with Steve Ramone, who also played on the record and does some live shows with us as well. Everybody's been helping out a lot. We're making with the record, there's a lot of awareness out there, and people are still excited about it. They want to see the live shows, and I know I do too. And we've done some streaming stuff with like Monsters of Rock, and some other small little things that I thought were significant. But perhaps the best way to do it is just to wait to get through this and then go out next year and support the record the right way doing a tour.
Nice. And you guys had one other guest, so to say, that would played on Drugland Weekend. For anybody that doesn't know about Ace Frehley being credited with an inaudible guitar track on that song, would you care to kind of tell that story about that?
Sure. It's pretty simple. We had a show in December. Alex didn't fly out to that show. What I did was I had Steve Ramone come out, who played on a couple of songs on the record. He came out and did the live show with us. And at that gig, I went backstage. Nobody was allowed to go see Ace back there. All the guys are sequestered in their one dressing room. And I seen Ace walk in with Jimmy, the ex-New York cop, who was his assistant. And Jimmy let me in the room, and Ace gave me a big hug and asked how I was doing. I said, good, we had a wonderful show. You can't walk in there. It's like packed like sardines, completely sold out. Detroit just hails Ace Frehley.
Yeah, that was at the Token, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I think we had a little less than 1,000 people in the room, and it only holds 900.
Yeah.
So it was so jam-packed, out of control. And I said, Ace, I'm doing a record right now, and I'd love you to be a part of it. Could you play some guitar? And he says, absolutely. Send me the songs, and I'll give you 3 or 4 solos. So I sent him the tracks to his management company, a guy named Pat, wonderful cat. These guys are all good friends of mine. I go back with Ace in 1988. And when Ace heard the stuff, it was A-OK. He was going to move on and do it. And so they sent me an email back, and I couldn't hear the guitars. And then when I got back to management, he said, we don't know what the problem is, Chip. We'll talk to Ace and see if we can straighten it out. And by that time, we're talking now at the end of January, early February. We're just getting ready to do the Monsters of Rock cruise with Extreme and Tesla and all those bands. And I had to turn a record in. I had to do something. So I just went in the studio and I laid it down in 1 or 2 takes, pretending I was Ace Frehley. That's where I got gave him the credit for unedited, inaudible guitar on track 7. And it's a great song as far as Kiss goes. That would be a perfect song for Kiss if they did drugs. It's a rock solid anthem. And Ace got back to me and said, Chip, I promise you I'll make it up to you in the next record. So I'll get Ace on the next album as well.
Now, I got to ask, did Ace know the name of the track before
Oh,
he
yeah,
played
absolutely.
on
I
it?
told him, and he smiled. He smiled and laughed. He said, send it to me. I'll give you 3 or 4 solos. Yeah, of course he did. I sent him that. I sent him Drugland Weekend, Fatal Distraction, and Help, I'm in Hell. 3 songs I sent. So
Nice.
maybe I'll get him on the next record. But I'm happy with the guitars that are on the record right now. I think it's a rock solid album. It's glitter rock at its best. And it's where I'm at right now. You know, you always worry about songs, like John Lennon says. All the great songs have already been taken. It's up to us as artists to find them and bring them down to you. And just all they can do is you put your best foot forward, put your best material out there, and then go out there and sell it. And that's what we're doing on this record. It's no different. I'm grateful for AC/DC putting another record out. That really is nice for us. Real shot in the arm, because at the end of the year, when you look at all the records that are out, we'll be in there with one of the rock bands that actually took a chance and put a record out during this pandemic. That's very embracing at this time of the year, where most bands are just like going to wait until next year to have a record out, or 2022. For a band to have the balls up to put a record out, I give them a lot of credit.
Yeah, very much so. And like I said, you guys did it in June, when that was probably the most uncertain time during this pandemic. So
Well, those are obviously downsides to the success of the record. But I will say this: we've been planning this all along. This is also our way to make sure that Brainwashed Generation gets in all of the top 10 end of year best lists.
nice.
Because
Well,
there won't be
I'll take it.
releases. It'll be us and AC/DC 5 times each in all the top 10.
Yeah, I can send you a screenshot from Amazon last month. That AC/DC Back in Black was at number 20, or Highway to Hell was at number 20, and Enuff Z'Nuff was at 21. Brainwashed Generation, Journey at number 22.
Oh, shit, nice.
With Greatest Hits, and number 23 was Queen, News of the World. Yeah, I'm in great
Nice.
company. You kidding me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck
Well, I
yeah.
would like to say we're better than they. Oh.
Freudian slip right there.
That's great. Like I said, I'm a big fan of the new record, and every song on it is fantastic. It's fitting in the theme of Enuff Z'Nuff, like you said, and I think that's why it's resonating with fans so well, is because it still sounds like Enuff Z'Nuff. And you know, some bands, whenever there's a lineup change or something like that, it doesn't necessarily sound the same, and some fans have an issue with that. But when you hear these songs, these sound like Enuff Z'Nuff songs, and it sounds like Enuff Z'Nuff playing them. So I'm a big fan of the record, and congratulations on the release to you guys.
But
I appreciate that.
Nobody knows the sound of Enuff Z'Nuff better than Chip. And while he's being very generous with making sure that everyone who figured into the album gets their due share of praise, I have to say, if you like the album, that's because Chip made sure that it sounded like it does in his head. And that is the sound of Enuff Z'Nuff. So anything that anybody contributed, if you're not playing what it sounds like to be in Enuff Z'Nuff, it doesn't get on the record. And Chip May, he's the gatekeeper. Let's put it that way.
That's a good word for it. Well, guys, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Thank you all for coming on here and talking to me about this and the whole history of the band, and with you guys and everything. It's been a lot of fun. Looking forward to hanging out with you guys down at the Kiss Expo next month in Florida.
December 18th and 19th, Christmas special, Enuff Z'Nuff, Ace Frehley. I think there'll be a couple of acts before. I wish I knew the names so I could give them some love. But the
I
4
think
bands.
I'm playing that night as well with Kurt Frolic from LA Guns. I'm playing in his band that night, which I think we're
Nice.
I think we're on right before you guys, if I have the schedule correct from
Is that
what
the
I've
one
been
with
told.
Well,
the
listen,
kids?
everybody don't take ass whipping personally, okay?
You will be finding, you'll find some napkins on your amplifier heads, though, just to dry the tears.
Yeah, so you can wipe the tears away after the
Yeah.
show. But
Nice.
listen, it's going to be a great night. I can't believe Ace is coming out. He'll be out there early. He'll probably fly out on the 18th. We'll all be staying at the same hotel. It's going to be a big rock and roll party, storytelling. You know, of course, we'll social distancing and our masks will all be on, so nobody needs to freak out about that. It's a big place we're playing. And then afterwards, a lot of it's going to be live streaming as well as the
Yeah.
live show. So everybody, if you're lucky enough to get a ticket for the gig, that's great. And if you can't, you can get a chance to check it out live streaming as well. It's going to be a real celebration, bro, and I'm looking forward to it. By the way, I want to mention my radio show real quickly. I'm on Dash Radio, dashradio.com, which is satellite radio. And my show is called The Monsters of Rock. I'm on 6 days a week, bro, exposing all the warts and scars and tattoos
Nice.
and what all these rock bands carry. I got 8,000 songs to pick from, the finest hard rock and heavy metal imaginable. And I'm on from Monday through Saturday. Rudy Sarzo's got his own show. And I know that people are clamoring to hear hard rock and heavy metal commercial free. Check us out, dashradio.com. You can download the app for free. And then you have satellite radio every single day. It's in all the cars. Everywhere you go, you want to rent a car, whatever, the ISOs, Apple Play, it's all there. You can all get it. It's really simple. And we probably have over 100 million people that have got on to the station.
Nice.
And I have, 700,000 people a day listening. And it's not because of me. It's because it's a show celebrating the great hard rock and heavy metal around the world, Europe, United States. It's all right there. And I play it every single day. And I give little anecdotes on what each band does and how they carry themselves. And so I think it's a show that it's not your normal show on radio. We're also syndicated in over 40 markets as well.
Oh, wow.
So if you want to hear about what's going on in the world with hard rock and heavy metal, any news, I expose it immediately. So Monsters of Rock on the Dash Radio Network. I'm on. Come check me out. And in the meantime, I wish everybody out there nothing but health. Be safe out there. God bless you all. And I hope to see everybody next year. By the way, happy Halloween, everyone. And we'll get together next year, and maybe I'll see some of you at the KISS show. Otherwise, be safe and have a good holiday season.
Oh, there you go. You heard it from himself. Everybody go get Brainwashed Generation out on Frontiers right now. Great Enuff Z'Nuff record. And guys, we'll go ahead and say bye off air. But thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And this was a fantastic show. We'll see y'all later.